Are you going to count me in?
As long as you're not going to sing.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the decision session for the Executive Member of Housing, Planning and Safer Communities. It's Wednesday, the 5th of February. We're at West Offices. Firstly, are there any apologies for absence? And I believe we do have some, so I'm going to ask Vicky Japes if she can give the apologies this morning.
Yeah, we've got apologies from Diana Brown and Pauline Stutchfield, the key authors of today's report. I'm deputising for them both. I'm Vicky Japes, Head of Housing Strategy and Performance.
Thank you, Vicky, and you're very welcome. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I have none. We have the minutes of the decision session held on the 4th of December, which I've had a look at and are absolutely fine, and I will sign at the end of the meeting. We do have public participation this morning, and I'm absolutely thrilled to invite Deputy Mayor Jo Coles from, well, she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Chair. I'm double-hatted today. So I'm here in my role as a councillor for the Westfield ward, but probably more significantly in my role as Deputy Mayor for Policing, Fire and Crime for domestic abuse sits within that portfolio. So I was just keen to come today with both of those hats on.
You are massively welcome. Thank you so much. So I'll hand over to you. You will have 3 minutes. My colleague Ben will be doing the timing. We have some flexibility as you're the only speaker. Whenever you want to start.
Thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to say how pleased I was to see that this report was coming for decision today. And I'm very grateful for you allowing me to speak. I just really wanted to welcome the report and the work that has clearly gone into this from officers, but also you, Councillor Pavlovic, and I know some of your other exec colleagues and the work that you're doing collaboratively on this. I know that Councillor Stills-Walshaw had a domestic abuse awareness session for local businesses. There has been a session for council employees. All of that, I think, is really important in terms of that collaborative working across and between council departments, and is something that I was really pleased to see happening. And the reason I wanted to speak today is obviously this policy for the City of York is part of the wider agenda, which is around trying to ensure that we halve violence against women and girls over the next 10 years. We know that 1 in 4 women and girls will be victims of domestic abuse during the course of their lifetime. The scale that we are dealing with at the moment is significant. And I think that one of the things I wanted to ensure that you were alive to was just the likely increase in that scale in the short term, at the very least, as we try and encourage confidence among victims and survivors to come forward. So at the moment, we know that only around 24% of domestic abuse is being currently reported nationally. We know that in terms of calls to the police, there is a call around every 30 seconds nationally that is around domestic abuse. And we know that around 20% of all crime nationally that is recorded is domestic abuse related. So the scale of this challenge is enormous. And therefore, the kind of collaborative approach that this report and policy is taking is extremely welcome. As a councillor in the Westfield ward, I have spoken to a number of residents over recent years about domestic abuse, who've been victims and survivors of domestic abuse. I think the issues that the report raises around the culture shift that is needed among officers, not within a particular department, but just generally to ensure that people aren't repeat victimised inadvertently, by virtue of the way in which council policies work. So pathways between housing and other support services are really, really important. We know that public health leads on this area for the council, but it's really important that housing officers, community workers, I know that the local area coordinators are really alive in this space as well. And it also means that certainly with my deputy mayor's hat on, if you like, that our policing colleagues, when people do choose to come forward and report to the police and have a criminal process underway, that they are also then not, that process as well doesn't cause inadvertent consequences for them and their families. Just briefly, the standards for tenants that are included and the expectations for tenants that are included in the report are really welcome. I think it's a victim-centred approach that you're trying to take. And I think the other thing that struck me was that although police involvement might be taking place, it isn't a requirement of people to be supported via this policy. And I think that's a really important message for residents to have. You do not need to have reported to the police in order to get support as a victim of domestic abuse. One of the things I did want to stress was just around, again, this is probably a challenge in a housing world, presumptions against women and children, for example, losing their family homes and having to move. It shouldn't be the onus on the victims to move. We should actually be trying to ensure that perpetrators are the ones who are being moved rather than victims who should be able to stay in their homes, and children should be able to stay in their schools, surrounded by their support networks. And just finally, as I said before, ensuring that victims of domestic abuse aren't further victimised. And I think this policy is a really good step in that direction. I look forward to working with you on this and with colleagues across North Yorkshire. I know this is something that North Yorkshire Council are also looking at. I would encourage you to share the practice and the policy that you're already doing in this area with them. And of course, I'm always happy to talk to you about this as we work on our plans for police and crime plans over the coming 4 years, and how we can ensure that this work is embedded in the wider work that policing is doing across North Yorkshire. But thank you.
Thank you so much, and you make some incredibly valid points. I think as we've got your knowledge, experience, and frankly role, if possible, would you be able to stay at the table and contribute to the discussion?
Very happy to, although I'm entirely in your hands.
That's good to know. So we now move on to the substantive agenda item, which is the City of York Council Domestic Abuse Resident and Tenant Policy. I'm going to hand over to Vicky to introduce the report. And thank you for stepping in at such short notice. But I know you've been intimately involved in the preparation of this report anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovic. As I was saying just before our meeting started, I was saying it's so lovely to be presenting a report that I don't feel wholly responsible for, and to be able to be so proud of it. So I suppose it's a real privilege to be here to present this report on behalf of Tiana and Pauline. It's a culmination of a lot of work. It brings to you the Housing Domestic Abuse of Residents and Tenants Policy for approval. But I think more than that, I like to see it as a demonstration of all the work that we're doing in housing to highlight the challenges of domestic abuse for many of our residents and customers, and to look at and to show that we are doing our best to respond positively to those challenges, and to move towards Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. So just very briefly, to put this in context, Public Health are the lead authority for the Council for Domestic Abuse, but when research was done for the joint strategy, York and North Yorkshire, one of the key concerns that people had was around housing. So both North Yorkshire, as the Deputy Mayor has highlighted, and York agreed to work towards Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance accreditation. Diana in our team is in post to do that work, and therefore, and she's worked wonderfully with a range of partners. I hope the paper evidences clearly how broadly we've consulted with partners and stakeholders to produce now what will be the foundation for the department's response to customers who disclose domestic abuse. Some key elements of it, I think, one of the obvious ones, but I think as the Deputy Mayor pointed out, historically, people who have been disclosing domestic abuse have not always been believed. So I suppose the key branding on this is absolutely that we will take a position of belief. No longer will the police have to be involved, or will you have had to tell your doctor and have letters and all of this. Our initial position will be a position of belief if someone discloses. I think then the point about being a person-centred solution is very important. And therefore, I suspect we will still have some people who want to move, because houses will have histories and memories for people, and some people will choose a fresh start. But importantly, for those who want to stay, they will be supported to stay safely. The report also enables us to move ahead with things like sanctuary schemes, where we make homes safer, step in and make homes safer. It allows us to work with partners to do some of that. So maybe someone like IDAS would help identify which measures would be most appropriate, and then we would look to fit them as part of our way of supporting people to maintain their tenancy. So we have the policy itself. I think another highlight of the paper is the Equalities Impact Assessment, which demonstrates that there's expected to be positive impact across all of the protected characteristics from this policy. So we're, again, very pleased to see that. Annex C just gives a little bit more context around the requirements to get accreditation for the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance. So if you've got any further questions on that, I'm happy to pick them up. And I suppose just to say that following your approval, she's nodding and hoping desperately we're going to get approval. Following your approval of this policy, we are planning then to introduce it to our customers, to raise awareness of it. We'll make a fact sheet so that it can be included in people's tenancy packs. We'll then introduce it obviously to all of our staff, all the ones who haven't been involved in producing it. And thereafter, we are developing a significant training programme to ensure that everyone is ready to work to the policy. And there will be detailed procedures for staff coming out of this to sort of interpret the policy and what this might mean for your specific bit of the process. Mm-hmm. So I think so I present the report to you and hope we can, we're seeking approval for the policy and for the continued work to work towards DAHA accreditation. We've also proposed that we bring you 6 monthly updates on that work as we're now in a state where we'll be progressing at speed.
Thank you so much, Vicky, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Coles and Councillor Coles. And firstly, I'd like to put on record, and I'd like you to pass on my thanks to Tiana in particular. Having met her and spoken with her, I know how much work she's put into this and how committed she has been to putting City York Council in a better place. And City York Council did need to be in a better place, as indeed all councils do. As Councillor Deputy Mayor Coles. I'm just going to call you Joe if that's all right, because otherwise it just becomes such a complicated world. As Joe has said, there is still a stigma. There is still a fear of reporting. There is a significant level of under-reporting, and we as ward councillors, but also having executive member responsibility, are aware of how difficult trying to make that leap from first reporting it, potentially to the police, and then approaching organisations for help and support. And the culture within the organisation that's working with them, and in particular I'm talking about housing now, has had to adapt in an environment where housing stock is limited and there are great pressures. Moving to a culture in which we are helping to enable as opposed to trying to obstruct is a very, very positive move forward. And it's equally pleasing that this is a county-wide initiative, and something that Jill raised in her presentation, in her 3 minutes, was we do need to work alongside our colleagues in North Yorkshire to see where we have synergies, where we can cooperate, because whilst it's incredibly important that families who do want to make a break are enabled to do so, that when they want to stay in their own home, and that's where it becomes a policing matter as much as anything else, is how do we enable somebody to stay safely in their own home and maintain their own links? And it's certainly conversations that I've had with the Deputy Mayor and with the police about, you know, how do they robustly impose conditions, bail conditions, for example, to ensure that a family can stay in their home and that they're not uprooted. So we have a meeting with the police and crime panel tomorrow, and I will raise that with you, and then I'll put you on the spot instead of you putting me on the spot. But the government focus on domestic violence is equally welcome, and the move to have coercive control, given the same parity of importance as any other form of domestic abuse, is I know, and has been an issue within the council. If there are no reports, people have not been believed. To move to this new culture in which DAHA accreditation will say our first port of call is to believe and to enable, is I think an incredibly positive move. So I just want to say thank you to all officers. I am thrilled that we have this policy. I want to see it embedded, which is why I've asked for 6 monthly updates. Are they going to be in public updates? Are they going to go to scrutiny, for example, housing scrutiny? How are you intending to present these 6 month updates?
They would probably go to scrutiny for discussion topics. Any decisions that required financial input would have to come to you.
Yes, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate
so we would anticipate things like, so we are moving on our sanctuary scheme.
Yes.
Jointly with North Yorkshire, York the City of York Council and North Yorkshire Public Health are working with IDAS on sanctuary measures. We feel we maybe need to move a little bit quicker. We also feel that as a supportive landlord, some of that responsibility sits with us.
Yes.
So we are looking to move forward on a sanctuary scheme, but obviously it would need budget allocated to it. So we would look to bring things like that to you back in 6 months with the hope that you would be comfortable to commit budget to supporting people to stay safely at home.
Fantastic. Councillor Combs.
I just, a couple of things that I just picked up on during the course of the discussion. It's badged as a resident and tenant policy. So I guess one of the challenges will be the different kinds of pathways that victims may be on. So if someone is in private accommodation and self-funded private accommodation, but for whatever reason, because of their abusive relationship, needs a supportive pathway out of that private accommodation, perhaps only temporarily, but they would need a way out of their current housing situation, at least temporarily, how that might work. Or equally, if someone is not a tenant but might need to become a tenant, I appreciate the housing demands across the city are significant. So just how that might work depending on the pathway that someone is on, and I'm sure that's something you're thinking about. And then just recognising, which I think the paper does, the kind of the coercive control stuff, Councillor Pavlovic, that you talked about in terms of financial exploitation, and again, what might be a temporary financial exploitation arrangement, or it might be debt that a victim has inherited from a partner that they may or may not be liable for legally. Just how we can ensure that this policy is victim focused in all of that, and we don't end up inadvertently again, like I said, putting victims in a repeat victimization scenario where actually there is no incentive to leave an abusive relationship, because actually they're going to end up increasingly punished by virtue of trying to seek help.
And that's what we hear and see so often, that leap to say, I need to be out of this relationship, but I can't, because I'm not in control of the finances. I am, I'm going to lose my home. I'm going to lose everything. And that's where part of the cultural shift has got to take place. Yes, there will be council tenants, and to some extent, once people are already a council tenant, the process is more straightforward. It's when you're coming out of that environment as an owner-occupier or a joint tenant, or living in private rented sector, and then presenting to the council as, how do I get out of this relationship? So can you respond to that?
I can pick up on both of them. So in anticipation of you approving our policy, Tiana's been doing lots of work with our teams already. We had sessions in the summer where all housing staff had training sessions. Tiana did a wonderful piece for all of those sessions. Very well received. So all of our tradespeople, all of our housing option staff, housing management staff, homelessness, temporary accommodation, all of our staff have had a small introduction to this work and a brief sort of touching on what it might mean, how it might look, how it might present. Everyone will be given further, more in-depth training. But Tiana has also been working with some of the key staff. So I suppose you could say people like housing options workers. So anyone can contact housing options to discuss their housing position, their circumstances. So that position of belief and person-centered, we're already starting to embed that change. We've also started to talk about what, at different stages of that journey, what options might look like. So obviously for some people, it might be temporary accommodation in we have a women's only homelessness hostel, we have temporary accommodation in various settings. Obviously, IDAS have the refuge, but we've also started to talk about whether actually staying where you are, even though you know you have to get out, might actually be your best temporary solution, if that's the one that you want. And how can we, now that we know about you, how do we support you to stay there, and how do we refer you to appropriate agencies who would know who would understand your circumstances? So yes, it is for anyone who comes to us and discusses living conditions, living circumstances. We also have our healthy and sustainable homes team who work with those who are living in private rented properties. They also look at adaptations and safe homes. So all of them will be trained as well. All of them will be helped to identify signs of domestic abuse or coercive control. Obviously there's complexities there around carer relationships and stuff, and they will all be supported to understand and interpret the policy for their services. To pick up the point around coercive control and debt, again, we've started work with our housing management team who are responsible for rent collection, conversations around rent arrears and things. And we've talked about how domestic abuse and coercive control might present as if it's someone refusing to do something or not entering into conversation about things. So we're looking, our staff are already being made aware of that, and we're looking at the policy will be accompanied by procedures that will talk about how you implement the policy, how you get to a position where you're able to talk about whether the debt belongs to the victim and the actual named tenant, what control they have over it, whether there's other ways of paying, whether there's ways of if someone's on benefits, whether they can be directed straight to paying rent, and conversations about joint and single tenancies and how we get the best solutions for victims out of those conversations. We're also doing a lot of work around contacting our tenants to talk to them about any particular personal circumstances they want us to take into account. So it could be where English isn't their first language, or where someone has a disability, or give me a bit longer to come to the door because for a mobility concern. But we also are highlighting where people have disclosed domestic abuse as part of that. And for those people, we're offering things like a flag that says only contact in the morning if someone's at home in the afternoon. And therefore, we will always be aware that if someone has disclosed to us, we will have that and we'll see it as a flag. So if doors are smashed in or various things, we'll have that level of understanding that depending on who is ringing with the reporting it, we can ask those sensitive questions around that and check that people are safe and whether they need more secure locks on that door next time, etc. So all of those bits of conversation are happening, and we're giving them specifically to the teams of staff so that they can really see what they individually can practically do to be part of the solution.
And I think these are really important points, and it does cut across a number of housing related policies. So, for example, damage to the insides of the property, doors being smashed. Oh, well, we've replaced your door once, it's smashed again, we're now going to start charging you. Without thinking, why is that door being smashed? But it's that point of we're now taking a safety first, victim first approach, so that, if you're in employment and in the private rented sector and you're in a situation that is just not safe for you and you have to get out, going to the council or going to the cops for that matter can be quite a big deal. It's about not re-traumatizing and not re-victimizing people that, all agencies need to take on board. And the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And this is our commitment and our first steps to show that, we will take a different approach. We are taking a different approach. We will work with our colleagues in other agencies, and it will be slow, and there will be mistakes, and there will be missteps going along the way. But we will hopefully embed a much better, more caring, more empathic approach and culture within the authority. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. And just before you kind of finally make your decision about this, I suppose all I wanted to say was I would just be really open to, look, I absolutely agree that this is the start of a journey. We absolutely need to see it in that way. This is not going to be the end. I certainly don't underestimate how difficult this is going to be, both in terms of the capacity of the system within the local authority to be able to deliver it, but also just in terms of the kind of cultural journey that some staff members are going to have to go on in order for this to be done differently. I suppose I just wanted to kind of stress that I am really open to understanding what is working and what isn't working in terms of this and any of the wider challenges it might throw up. And I think we need to just, as you've already said, you're going to be reviewing how this is working regularly, but I'm also very open to understanding what the implications of it are financially, but also just in terms of the kind of what else it might present in terms of consequences that we might not have thought of. And so just an offer really to officers and to you to ensure that we can maintain this dialogue and ensure that we're working collaboratively with colleagues in North Yorkshire, but also with the Combined Authority, particularly around things like housing supply or the financial support packages that might be required for victims to enable them to cope and recover, just to ensure that offer is officially on the table and that we maintain this kind of in the spirit of collaboration.
I think that would be really useful. I think that, to be honest, maybe pulling all of the MCA, the Combined Authority, North Yorkshire Police, ourselves, and agencies together to say, right, what are our challenges going to be? And it may be that there are some financial challenges for an authority to be able to deliver in the way that we want to deliver, to help keep particularly women and girls safe, and children. So I am more than happy to approve this policy. I look forward to, as I've said, this is the start of a journey. We will work together. We will work behind the scenes. We will work overtly in public as well. Without further ado, I want to say thank you again to you, Deputy Mayor Coles, to you, Vicky, to all the staff, and I formally adopt this policy. There are no other agenda items. We have no urgent business. Therefore, I call this meeting to a close at 10:35.